We are talking with Bridget today from Atrium. I'll let her introduce in a couple of minutes. As folks join the session today, we want to talk a little bit about data-driven habits for driving customer success. And kind of the core theme here, if you may have noticed in the last couple of weeks for us, has been really around how do you leverage data to drive customer success as a business function. The really cool and interesting thing about our guest today is that she works for Atrium, which has a similar mindset and methodology for driving sales functions using data. So we're going to talk about that. We'll like to understand how that works. Then we're going to go a little bit deeper into how Bridget runs CS for her team and leverages data in that function. So I think it's going to be a really exciting conversation. Bridget, how are you today?
I am great, Asim. Thanks for having me.
Great. Good to have you. So, Bridget, maybe take a moment to introduce yourself, your career, your background a little bit, let people, our audience, get to know you.
Totally, yeah. So I started off actually in revenue operations. After graduating college, I was handed the keys to my first Salesforce instance and was told, hey, figure it out. So that was kind of my foray into RevOps. I stuck with that for a couple of years at different startups in Wisconsin and then San Francisco. And after moving here and unexpectedly finding myself looking for work, I was thinking, hey, I'm going to stay in RevOps. That's what differentiates me from, the rest of my peers. I know how to use Salesforce. And I ended up finding an opportunity in customer success at Atrium, which, as you mentioned, is a data-driven sales management platform. I'll get into that a little bit more later. But what really attracted me about the company and the role was, one, I got to use my RevOps and Salesforce knowledge to help out customers, which was something that I had never done before, was speak directly to customers. They were looking for CSMs early stage that had a revenue operations background. And so I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a leap of faith and see what happens here. I think it's a really cool product and mission and would have made me a lot better at my job when I was in revenue operations. So started there February 2020 as a CSM. 3.5 years later, and now the director of CS here. We have 5 CSMs, 4 implementation specialists, support specialists, as well as an implementation team manager, full go-to-market org of SDRs, AEs, marketing, the full gamut. And it's been really awesome to, watch as our product has changed over the years to kind of try and keep up with the many interests and problems of RevOps and sales leaders. So many of the things, we can do a lot of different things with the product, but ultimately what we're trying to help all of our customers do is create an advanced pipeline to help them hit their next quarter number. So that's kind of from a high level, what our goal is in CS is to help kind of prove value for our customers along that journey to get there.
Yeah, awesome. So I think the cool thing that struck me in your introduction is the fact that you worked in RevOps before, and now you've moved into a CSM role. And when we last talked, you shared a story about why that is the case. Like it sounds like everybody in the CS role in your organization has some RevOps operations experience from their past, and that's because Atrium sells into that function. So could you talk a little bit about Atrium and how what Atrium does for our audience, for those who are not familiar?
Yeah, for sure. So we did. When I joined Atrium, I was the second CSM. There was a head of CS, another CSM, both of whom came from long revenue operations careers. And I was the third person to join that team, also with RevOps experience, just because as early stage, we needed to make sure we had subject matter expertise. But over time, we kind of evolved and started hiring from different backgrounds and then training on that knowledge. So now what we're aiming to do is create CSMs that have that subject matter expertise, but turns out there's only so many RevOps people who want to move into CS, So as we've scaled, we've kind of abandoned that, but yeah, so now we have a ton of CSMs who know a lot about Salesforce, know a lot about RevOps, all that stuff. And the reason why, as you said, is because, Atrium our customers are SaaS sales organizations at startups and tech companies. And a lot of our core users are leaders and folks in RevOps in general. And like I said earlier, what we're trying to help them do is look at those leading indicator metrics ahead of bookings and revenue quota targets, and say, help them kind of figure out what is the blueprint for success for each of their reps and teams. So the way I kind of put it is like, in Salesforce, Salesforce is like a really powerful Rolodex, if I put it very simply. And it's really obsessed with accounts and opportunities, right? It's pretty, there's a lot of functionality in terms of reporting on like the health of accounts, the health of opportunities to certain extents and contacts. But what it's not really helping you do is gauge the health of your reps and your teams, and see where they're struggling, which is going to be way up funnel from their bookings target, right? So Atrium's kind of helping RevOps and sales leaders identify where they're really successful reps, why they're being successful. So in those leading indicator activity and efficiency metrics like emails, meetings, activity per op created, advancing pipe down funnel, stuff like that. And then also helping set goals for teams based on those findings. Tracking goals, and then helping them see around corners so that they know, hey, like if we have a problem, we know it early and we can course correct and, track our progress in Atrium. So that's kind of from a high level.
Yeah. So Atrium customer typically is the head of sales supported by their ops team. And they're trying to figure out what is working, what isn't working in terms of the reps' productivity, and then sort of replicate that across their organization. Is that sort of the key value prop from a customer perspective?
Yeah, I would say so. The kind of ultimate problem, though, that we're trying to solve with that is helping you understand what you need to do to hit your next quarter numbers. So kind of think longer term rather than getting you out of that vicious cycle that a lot of sales and RevOps people are in, which is like, focusing on this quarter, and then the quarter ends and realizing we did not plan for next quarter, and now it's next quarter.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you got it.
Great. And what struck me in our last discussion is that you guys are such a data-driven organization, and the culture, of course, stems from the fact that you're trying to solve similar problems for the sales side of the house, as what Immersa does for the CS side of the house. Tell us a little bit about what types of data sources you bring in to help sales leaders be successful, from one quarter to the next. So what kind of data do you look for? What metrics do you give them back that helps them plan their sales productivity and their sales pipeline better?
So we turn out 100+ metrics, and we pull it actually very simply from about 3 integrations. One is Salesforce, one is Google or Microsoft, depending on if you're using that for email and calendar. And then the other is Gong. So it's really cool because like it's actually very easy to set up, but it turns out so many out of the box metrics and alerts on those metrics based on anomalies in the data. So from Salesforce, we're looking at account opportunity ownership data, stage advancements through the funnel, touches on accounts, opportunities, and contacts. And then from Google or Microsoft, we're counting emails sent and counting meetings on calendar. That I think is a really, really awesome part of Atrium, because anybody in RevOps will know that activity tracking in Salesforce can be like kind of a nightmare. So just simply counting emails and meetings straight from the source is actually kind of a godsend for a lot of our customers. And then lastly, from Gong, we're looking at talk ratio, patience, longest monologue, so on and so forth. So we're not creating any new Gong metrics you wouldn't see in that platform. But the really cool part about it is you can set goals on those metrics and you can trend them out over time, which isn't a part of Gong functionality. So you can see how somebody has improved or, degraded in a particular metric in any time frame that you want.
Very cool. Very cool. I think that provides a really helpful context, Bridget, for the conversation we're about to have, which is how you, from a CS standpoint, now operating your team, think about data, because in essence, it's a parallel to what you're already serving your sales customers with Atrium. So now let's maybe shift gears and talk a little bit about your team and the way that you manage your team, the way you leverage data. So what are some of the more important metrics that you care about as a leader of the team that you watch regularly, daily, weekly, et cetera? Let's maybe start the conversation there.
Yeah. So it's always evolving, right? If you and I were talking a year ago, I would have said leading indicator metrics, but it would have been more focused on meetings and emails, because our process was different at that point. So what I mean by that is I would have said, hey, I want to make sure that each CSM is being productive. The way at the time that we measured that was meetings and emails, of course, as well as like renewal bookings and stuff like that. But we've really evolved over the past year and basically worked backwards from our best renewals. I think everybody listening probably has some that come to mind when they think about their proudest wins on their team. Maybe that's like a really high value renewal that broke a record. Or maybe it's just like an account that was really unhealthy 6 months before renewal and then got to amazing health and renewed and is strong now. But we all have those that kind of like give us comfort when we're lying in bed awake at night and worrying about our success of our team. So think about those. And then we walk backwards from that and we were thinking, all right, what happened at these accounts? What was kind of like the common through lines throughout these accounts that we kind of happened upon on accident, that we can create intentionally with the rest of our accounts going forward. So when we walk backwards from that, it was like, all right, we had manager usage. So in that case, for us, it's like AE, SDR manager usage. Those are generally our customers who we need using and adopting the platform to show success. 2, we had leadership alignment. So VPs of RevOps, VPs of sales, CROs, any budget holder, decision maker, they were, aligned with us, saw the value, and then advocated, for signature on that renewal. And then 3 was we had budget, of course. And then, in 2023, we were talking 2 years ago, maybe we wouldn't be talking about budget, but that is obviously a huge thing that you very much intentionally have to go after. So, those 3 things in and of themselves are kind of lagging indicators, right? They can happen on accident, but it's better if you understand how to drive them intentionally. So that's kind of like where the CSM habits and the data-driven habits of this conversation we're having come into play. And the way that we approached it was thinking, all right, we have our accounts, our customers as part of this equation of our company's success, but we also have our team, right? And opportunities and accounts come and go, especially, when you're selling to other startups, like they can literally disappear at any point. But your team is what's going to be with you for hopefully much longer than like a renewal cycle. So the things that we worked further backwards from on those 3 budget, leadership, alignment, and management prongs of a renewal were basically turned out to be proof of ROI. So we need CSMs actively proving ROI. We need CSMs multi-threading and engaging with executive leadership. And we need CSMs to be doing formal kind of value delivery reviews or QBRs to kind of drive all 3 of those things at once. So those are the 3 things.
Okay. So you covered a lot of ground there. Maybe let's, just take it in shorter chunks as we go forward.
Yeah.
So, in order to measure these metrics, in order to make these metrics real for your team, what are some of the what's sort of the operating cadence, right? So you guys review it regularly. Is there some tools that the teams have access to? Just maybe talk through a little bit about the operating cadence side of things and how this works.
Totally. Yeah. So all of that doesn't really matter if it's just ideation, it's not incorporated into your operational cadences. And one thing that we're really big on here for our customers and for ourselves at Atrium is making sure that data is brought into meetings you're having with your reps, one-on-ones, team meetings, all hands. Anytime that you're meeting internally as a team or as a company, you're bringing in metrics to those meetings and keeping it, an element of that meeting data-driven. So first, as you can imagine, we are bringing in those 3 metrics I mentioned into our OKRs first of all. So we're setting goals on them on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis for our reps, and then creating reports for them in Salesforce. I'll kind of get to how we log that in a second, Asim, because I don't want to get too ahead of this question. And then having reps update their own kind of personal accountability spreadsheets before each one-on-one, so that they are aware of their progress toward those goals, which we also track in Atrium conveniently. And then also just kind of externalizing those goals to leadership and to the whole company in kind of periodic update emails, so that the whole company is aware of, like, you know, our accountability against those metrics. But it really starts with bringing them into OKRs, making sure the whole team is bought in on the why, and then bringing that data into meetings.
Perfect. And then Bridget, you've shared some examples of this with me in the past. I think you might have some examples as we kind of go through this today. So feel free to bring up any slides or any materials that would be useful for folks to follow along.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, you know, once you have these metrics available, you're sharing that with the team. How do you actually ensure that as things are changing and the business is changing, the market's changing, that, you know, you're sort of adjusting the OKRs and the metrics? Do you do that on a quarterly basis? Is it something that you do more frequently, less frequently? Like, can you address a little bit of that?
Quarterly, I would say. I mean, I think that's really just for like the sake of team morale, and like planning is assuring that everybody knows like what the plan is for the next 90 days, and that we're not going to alter it substantially. But we are in the middle actually right now of like quarterly retros where we assess if those were the right goals and then adjust accordingly. So yeah, it's every 90 days or so.
Got it. And from your team's perspective, are they responsible? I mean, most CSM teams, of course, are responsible for renewals, but are they responsible for adoption, for upsells, for some of the other aspects of the sales of the customer journey as well?
So the way that we have it divided out is the implementation team I mentioned earlier is going to be handling setting up the team or setting up the customers during implementation. That usually takes 30 to 60 days, and then hands off those contacts and accounts to the CSM. The CSM is then responsible for the long-term customer relationship all the way through renewal, which they are owning and closing. AEs handle expansions. And then, yeah, from then on, it's all the CSM. But I will say that if there are expansions, the implementation team is handling the implementation of expanded users as well. So the start of a customer's journey is always going to be with our implementation team, and from then on, it's CSM.
Got it. And tell us a little bit about what that renewal approach looks like. So are you watching the data to see how customers are actually using the product, Atrium's product? Are you, sort of more sort of time bound in the way that you approach renewals? So, and if there's opportunities for upsell, or if there's some risk of downsell or attrition, how do you manage that? Maybe like from a data standpoint, like what signals are you looking for in the data to identify those kinds of opportunities or risks in the cycle?
Yeah, so I'd say number one thing that we're looking for in the data is usage. So when we see healthy manager usage, which for us looks like we're measuring it on a kind of how many days have you been active in the last 30. Our number is 8. We want you logging in twice a week every month. And the more the better, of course, but that's kind of what we're shooting for in terms of a successful user. So we're looking at the percentage of users at an account who are logging in that often, right? So if that number is really low for a customer, then we know, okay, like we've lost them a little bit, right? And we can proactively re-engage them with, a save plan that we create. But yeah, I would say that's number one. The bummer is that, and I'm sure other people on this call would agree that, or anybody listening, I guess, would agree that manager usage is not sufficient for a renewal. But it is pretty much necessary. So we need to get that part right. And then we also need to be making sure that CSMs are logging multi-threading plays, which I'll go into in a bit, on the accounts, as well as proof of ROI. If we don't see that an account has if we see, for example, an account has really high manager usage, but zero proof of ROI logged and zero exec multi-threads logged, that's also a red flag. And that is kind of a different issue, right? That means that a CSM wasn't taking opportunities to prove ROI or exec multi-thread, or just wasn't talking to that account for a few months, right?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting. So there's a couple of key points that I heard in this context. One, that product usage data is necessary but not sufficient. So we'll come back to that one in a moment. But then you also mentioned the number that you're looking for is the, have they logged in twice a week and 8 times a month? How did you arrive as that being the primary metric to watch for? Like, is it experientially? Is it anecdotally? Is it through some data analysis? Are there other metrics like that from a usage standpoint that you look for to say, are they at that threshold or above or below?
Yeah, good question. So candidly, that 8 out of 30 days metric has been our goal for as long as I've been at Atrium. And I think the rationale for that is it's going to look different for any product, right? But for Atrium, we're thinking, well, if a sales manager is bringing in data to their meetings, they should be logging into Atrium at least twice a week, assuming that they bring it up in their team meeting and assuming that they bring it up in at least one-on-one or one-on-one, right? So if they're logging in, and ideally you really want them doing it like 3, 4, 5 times a week, or 3, 4, 5 days a week, I should say. But 2 seems like, all right, this person has it, it's a habit, right? And if they're not logging in every week, then it's much less of a habit, much less of a part of their operational cadence. It is more just like an extra side piece as we kind of see it. So that's why we go for that number. In terms of other numbers that we're looking at, we're also looking at page views. So if somebody's logged in 8 days in the last 30, but they have only looked at 8 page views in the last 30 versus somebody who has the same days logged in, but have looked at 500 pages, who's the healthier user, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly there's signals that we need to improve their breadth of adoption so that they're not just looking at one report and then logging out. Because
Got it. Okay, so let's go to the product usage data is necessary but not sufficient. So what other metrics or what other data points are you seeking and trying to understand whether a customer is in a healthy place or not?
Yeah, so we have a user health score right now that we haven't kind of spread out across accounts yet, but what we're overall looking at an account level is like the average user health score. The user health score itself is a combination of usage. So it's made up a formula of about 50% usage, right? So that's if you're logging in 8+ days, that's weighted at 50%, and you are already at like a 50 out of 100. But other things that we want to see on a contact level, which kind of goes out to the rest of the account level, is proof of ROI logged on that contact, as well as exec multi-threads logged. Or sorry, that's actually not included. No, it is included, sorry. Exec multi-threads logged on decision makers, contacts in Salesforce. So we use a kind of like, this is kind of the unconventional part, I think, of our motion, is that all CSMs log tasks in Salesforce after every single interaction that they have with a customer. They do this manually. So after each meeting and after each email that they send to a customer, in theory, they should be logging what we call a customer success play, which is logged as a task on a contact level. We have many different types, I think 30 different types of CS plays that they can log. And this includes anything from like risk identification, such as like, we had a big troubleshooting back and forth, so I'm going to log an at-risk troubleshooting play and talk about what they were stuck on, all the way to signs of awesome health, which would be like, we achieved an example of ROI, which for us would be like positive examples of improving a team or rep's performance or behaviors that manager or that account or the leadership we're looking to achieve. So when we can log those positive interactions and proof of ROI on that contact, it attributes to their user health score, and then attributes to the average user health score at an account. So we can see, are we having a particular account with low unhealthy users, or high healthy users. And that way we can kind of gauge we need to jump in and do more.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And multi-threading, can you explain the concept for those not familiar? What does that mean?
Yeah. So multi-threading in the way that we use it is meaning engaging with leadership at a particular account. So the reason that we kind of started focusing on that is because we were a year ago, we were having this conversation. I would probably be bragging about how many meetings we have with our core our managers, right? At our accounts who we need to get their usage up, and we're meeting with them all the time and providing them excellent CS support, and they love it. That's all good and well, but that you are missing an opportunity. We were missing an opportunity to really compound the benefits of that manager one-on-one time by not multi-threading that back up to their boss or their boss's boss, who generally are the decision makers and budget holders, right? So if if I have a meeting with an AE manager and it's awesome, and they express that they love the tool and they've gotten so much out of it, and then I send my follow-up email to them and I don't forward it to their VP of RevOps or their CRO, say, hey, just want to let you know, things are going really well with so-and-so, see below for takeaways, like blah, blah, blah. I'm missing a huge opportunity to build trust, credibility, and a relationship with those exec humans who are ultimately the decision makers and decide if they're going to renew or not. So that's just like the nature of our product. I mean, everybody's products are different. All their users are different, and the people that they engage with on a regular basis are different. We found ourselves mostly on meetings with people who were first level managers, which is awesome, and we love them. But ultimately, like, it's not helpful to us or the first level manager who loves the tool if we're not creating a higher chance of renewal, which helps when you multi-thread.
Got it. Got it. Very helpful. There's a question here on the chat channel. And by the way, for folks listening in, please feel free to ask questions. We've got Michael, of course, and Lina, Madeline. Welcome back, Madeline. Madeline was one of the guests on an early show. And then Abdel, of course. Lina asked the question, how do you ensure that the data that you're collecting and analyzing is accurate and reliable? So is there some process that you go through before the data actually is used to generate metrics for the CS team?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Lina. I think that one thing that helps is just time, right? It's like usage data over time. Like, we've kind of figured out what are signs that it's being buggy. We look at contacts to make sure if their last login date and their days active in the last 30 aren't really lining up. Like, if it says, hey, Asim logged in last on November 12th, 2022, but he's been active 10 days in the last 30, then we know Asim's contact is messed up and we got to fix it. So, and we run it up the flagpole to do that. So that's just like one little way that our CSMs are kind of trained to make sure that everything's adding up. But otherwise, aside from usage data, like we've been talking about, I've been saying, hey, our reps are logging plays, right, in Salesforce. And that is a huge source of data for us to gauge not just the health of the accounts, but the health of the reps. And am I helping my team be the best CSMs and implementation specialists they can be? And if they're not logging the plays that they should be logging, then that's my coaching conversation with them. So it's like using data to drive my coaching conversations. I can kind of show what this looks like in Salesforce. So if anybody's listening on the podcast, I'll try and be descriptive. Essentially what we did here is I'm showing a slide about how we created a play type in Salesforce on the task or on the activity object. We have a button, which you can kind of see in the background here, where after I have a meeting with anybody in my book, I go to their contact in Salesforce, I log a CS play, and then I choose from the list here of all the different types of interactions I could have had with them. So there's a lot of them. But once I kind of choose this from the pick list, I type some notes about that, about my time with them and the takeaways. I can copy the email link of the follow-up email I sent to them because we use Mixmax. So it helps you share email links so that anybody can go in and look at Julio's contact in this case and go see the conversation I had with them and the follow-up email I sent. So Lina or Lena, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but you're wondering how we can make sure that data is accurate. Having CSMs add to the kind of credibility of that play with the email link or with the call recording link just makes it so that like they can't really, they're not going to like make something up for that customer, right? Because they know that at any point anybody could go in and kind of like look and see, did this interaction actually happen? So those are kind of, how we make sure that things are accurate and up to code. But CS plays are very powerful and really show the strengths and like where a rep could be coached as well.
Got it. Very cool. So, one of the things that obviously underpins a lot of what you're showing us in terms of data and metrics, et cetera, is the technology that helps bring all of this information together in one place. Can you share a little bit about what technical infrastructure is available, like that you are using today to bring product data, usage data into Salesforce, to bring, other data sources into Salesforce? Like what other data sources are you considering? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so the way that we get data into Salesforce, I know the 3 tools that we use. I'm not the person to ask in terms of how they exactly work, but from my understanding, it's a combination of Redshift, Segment, and Census. And those are all integrated, tracking, usage data from Atrium, and then plugging that into the contact and account level. I will say that we have a lot of interactions with our Census CSM, who they've been really awesome in helping us get really granular usage metrics on the contact and account levels. And we've kind of like grown out our arsenal of very granular metrics to answer different questions as we kind of evolve in our maturity.
Got it. So I'm curious, if Bridget, like you obviously established a very data-driven process for your CS team already, but if every company is constrained in some way in resources and time and effort, if you could sort of wave a magic wand, what would that perfect sort of scenario look for you? Where like are there gaps today that you think about and wish that you could close for your CS teams to operate more efficiently?
Gaps in terms of like
the data that's available, or the type of
yes,
processes that they're running, or the way that they engage with customers?
Yes, the answer to your question is yes. And I'm trying to think of exactly if I could wave a magic wand, what I would do first. I think that ultimately we have a lot of awesome data in our Salesforce Rolodex on a contact and account basis. I'm sure if you asked our CSMs, they'd have a very quick answer for you, but my answer is the presentation of it is tough. Like I would love to be able to see trends over time. Right now, the way that we collect trends over time in terms of usage is like comma delineated timestamp fields that are brought to us by our Census CSM, which are great. But if I could simply see over time, week by week, how many days active has this contact been, or the average contact of this account been, that would be so helpful, not just in internal, being able to action that internally, but also like we share usage data with our customers as proactively as we can. So if I could show trends over time and say, sometimes they ask on a random day, I think we've all been there, hey, what's adoption like right now? And you're like, let me go look. And you think 20 days ago it was awesome, so it's probably still awesome. And today it's not awesome. It would be really great to be able to contextualize that in good ways or bad ways, right? Just to kind of show the whole story, because at any moment in time, for whatever reason, adoption can be low. And that can be kind of a scary thing to present to a customer if you're like, I swear it was better a month ago.
Yeah, got it. Anything else? Because you said there were like a number of things you wanted to.
That's the big thing that comes to mind. Okay. And I think it's one of those things where I'm so used to like the limitations that we have that I kind of like block them out, because it's like, I know what is and isn't possible with our current setup. And so it's hard to even like maintain.
Well, we didn't plan on this response from you, but thank you for describing Immersa. And anytime you want to try us, we can do that. Bridget, I think this has been, I think, super helpful in terms of understanding what your current infrastructure looks like, where some of the opportunities are. I'm going to shift gears a little bit away from data. You guys have had a philosophy of hiring people with ops skills because you're selling into that domain, and therefore you're interacting with a lot of people with ops and sales skills. When you think about customer success teams in your context, what's the right skill set that you look for in people that you hire, or people that do well, people that grow with the organization?
I think the two words that come to mind, I guess I'll say nouns, are accountability and persistence. I really appreciate working with humans who do what they say they're going to do. I think that's truly maybe 75% of the battle of being a CSM. So, as like the CSMs on my team, I think really embrace this. But when customers are like customer delight, you can deliver it really easily by simply just doing what you said you're going to do as next steps after your call, right? So just like that rigorous accountability and I can't shut my laptop until these things are done. That's an awesome quality to have in a person. And I think that translates very well to a lot of careers, but especially being a CSM. Persistence also, I think like not being, I think being a CSM sometimes feels a lot like being an SDR, because you are engaging a pool of humans who are varying levels of interested or available to hear about and utilize what you're trying to get them to utilize. So being persistent in not taking a no response for a no or for a never, but rather like, I'm going to continue following up. We have some language on our team, which is we kind of joke about, which is like, given the importance of this task or this project, you can expect to hear from me if I don't hear back, and so I think that I want our customers, all of them, to say to our CSMs at some point, thank you for your persistence, right? To me, that marks an amazing CSM. So I'll keep it short there. There's plenty of other things, but those two, I think if you can embrace both of those, you will be successful, because there's nothing that's going to stop you from learning, growing, and developing the skills you need to be a great CSM.
I think that's fantastic advice. In fact, you're echoing what I heard a while back from an exec at Microsoft that talked about this notion of a say-do ratio. You do what you say you're going to do. And I love that. I mean, the terminology, it's so simple, right? What's your say-do ratio? And then, of course, persistence. I think that goes a long ways. And I really appreciate the example that you share, the language that, the way that you phrase it, it's more about making it about the customer. And why you're approaching them as opposed to your own agenda. So that's really cool. This has been a pleasure to host you today, and thank you so much for sharing all these insights and how you operate your team and run your team. I think if anybody wants to reach out and have any additional conversations, if you don't mind, what's the best way to reach out to you? LinkedIn, email, etc. would be great.
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find. Bridget Sicard. Sicard. My LinkedIn link is LinkedIn/Bridget-Sicard, I think. And then my email is bridget@atriumhq.com. Please reach out. I have a lot to learn from this community too. So I would love to hear from anybody and spark up some conversations.
Thank you, Bridget. That was a pleasure. And we'll wrap up here. So if you're joining us from wherever, please share the recording of this call with your friends and colleagues, and we'll tune in for another exciting session next week. But thanks again for your time.